Alright, so we are going to continue in Esther 4 today, but as a little review from chapter 3, we saw Haman rise out of nowhere, right? He just appears out of nowhere, and he rises to great power, second in command, and it goes straight to his head, right? He thinks that he's the big boss, that he's the big guy on campus, right? And the order goes out that everyone is to bow down to Mordecai. Okay, as if he were the king, even though he's only second in command. Well, we have, or Haman, bows down to Haman. Mordecai, who refuses to bow down, but remember, he's tattletaled on by a bunch of other people because Haman doesn't even realize that Mordecai's not bowing down until somebody points it out. But when he does, and he sees this, he gets really angry. He gets genocidal, and he wants to wipe out the entire race of Mordecai, not just Mordecai. Because he could have very easily gone to the king and said, this guy isn't following your command, and the king would have taken care of him. But he doesn't. Haman decides to make a plan to get rid of all the Jews. Okay? So he convinces King Ahasuerus to issue a royal decree to wipe out every single Jew, man, woman, child, the young and the old, and everyone in between in 11 months. And everybody in the entire kingdom looks at their mail that day and goes, what happened? Right? We just got a decree a couple of years ago about Queen Vashti, and now we're getting this decree that we're all going to be wiped out. And there's nowhere for them to run, unfortunately. There's no safe place for them to go. King Ahasuerus' kingdom reaches far beyond where they could travel, even in 11 months. Okay? So that is the backdrop of chapter 4, so we're going to start in chapter 4. Esther 4 says, when Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. Okay, so tuck that little piece of information away. No one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province where the king's command and his decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. Okay? So they've opened up their mail, and they realize that they now have a death sentence, and there isn't really anything that they can do about it. So Mordecai, when he hears this, he immediately starts mourning, very openly, very passionately. He tears his clothes, he puts on sackcloth, he covers himself in ashes, and he goes right out into the middle of the square, in the middle of the Capitol, and starts just weeping before the Lord. Okay, so very public, open display of mourning. Okay, this wasn't just a personal sadness and grief. He didn't just go into his prayer closet and pray. He went out in public to mourn for what was going on. Okay, and he's not alone. Every Jew in the entire kingdom, it says, is fasting and weeping and lamenting, and they're laying in sackcloth and ashes. That means they're literally prostrating themselves on the floor, on the ground, just absolutely mourning what this was. So this wasn't just a political issue. This was their life. This was life and death, okay? Because they understood that once a Persian king signed a decree into law, it could not be changed. There was no way it could be changed. And they knew that, and it was terrifying to them. So think back to the book of Daniel and King Darius. Even as much as King Darius wanted to save Daniel from that lion's den, he couldn't, because the word became law. Okay? He couldn't go back on his own law. But just like Daniel in the lion's den, God's got a plan for his people. Okay? Law or not. So Mordecai knows this. He knows the story of Daniel in the lion's den. He knows countless other stories about how God has intervened and taken care of the people of Israel. Okay, so he knew the promises of God. And he knew that his own actions were the spark that led to all of this. So imagine the grief and the weight that he is carrying, because he chose not to bow down, and all of Israel is in trouble. Okay? And yet, I wonder if he recalled the words of Joel. Joel 2 says, return to me with all of your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. And Mordecai remembered that God had always responded to heartfelt repentance. So would he do it again? Would he do it for this group of Israel? Okay? So how do you think Mordecai's faith shaped the way he grieved? That's a question.
I think he was distraught, you know? He was overwhelmed with what was going to happen. And he knew it was going to happen.
Absolutely. So we see these physical manifestations of his grief. He doesn't just go home and throw a pity party and cry about it. He's literally putting on all of this display of grief and mourning.
For everyone to see. Now some of us, like, I'm one like I like to cry in private.
Right.
I'm not a pretty crier, so that's done in private.
Yeah. And he's out in the middle of the capital city.
Right.
And just absolutely mourning. So everyone who's walking by is seeing what's going on. And there are several Jews who are joining him in all of this. Okay, so let's find out what happens. Verse 4. When Esther's young women and her eunuchs came and told her the queen was deeply distressed, she sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he may take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasury for the destruction of the Jews. Okay? So, because Mordecai is out in the open, people see him, and obviously news is going to get back to the palace. Okay? So what we're told there is Esther's young women. Now these are these 7 women that were chosen for her by her eunuch and got to rise with her to power. Okay? So these are these 7 young women and her eunuchs. So they see Mordecai and all these other Jews out in the middle of the square, and they're like, what in the world is going on? And they go inside and they tell Esther, hey, your adoptive father, he's out here and he's in sackcloth and he's mourning and he's screaming and I don't know what's going on with this guy, okay? And so she says, knowing what we read, no one can enter into the king's palace with sackcloth on. So she sends him a change of clothes, okay? Because if he changed, he could come inside and they could talk face to face. And he refuses. He refuses to give up his moment of mourning and grief and his display in order to come inside and talk to her. So now we got to do this through the third party system, okay? So he refuses, and so she sends out one of her most trusted eunuchs, okay, to find out what's going on. What is happening and why is Mordecai doing this? And it's interesting, this eunuch's name means truth, okay? Because he's going to have to be the messenger back and forth between them. So he's going to have to speak truth as he's this go-between. So he goes out there to Mordecai and he says to Mordecai, what's going on, man? Why are you doing all of this? And Mordecai tells him everything, down to the penny that Haman is getting ready to hand over to the king from all of these Jews. And he gives him a copy of the decree. Okay? And he says, this is what's going on. We're all have a death sentence on our head. Okay? And so it's easy to forget that Esther is in the palace and she's guarded. She doesn't know anything that's going on. She did not know about the royal decree that was happening in 127 different provinces, and every single Jew's out there mourning and weeping, and she's in the palace and has no idea what's going on outside. Okay? So she's very isolated in all of this. Okay? So can you relate to this eunuch that he's kind of stuck as the go-between between these two people? He's having to mediate what's going on here, okay? Being responsible for all of this. So let's find out what happens. In verse 8. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go back to Mordecai and say this: all the king's servants and all of the people of the king's providences know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is one law: to be put to death, except the one whom the king holds out the golden scepter to, so that he may live. But as for me, I have not been called to come to the king these 30 days. Okay? So Mordecai tells Esther, through her eunuch, that she needs to go to the king, and she needs to plead their case. Okay? She's got direct access to this king. You need to go tell him what's going on and plead our case. And Esther sends back a very real concern. It's illegal for me to do that. It's illegal for anyone to do that. No one can just bust up in the king's throne room and tell him what to do. Okay? The penalty for that is death, unless the king stretches out his scepter to that person. If he doesn't, it's lights out. Okay? And it was actually very, very real threat, because there were guards who stood in front of the door, and they had axes. And if you came into that room and the king did not do it quick enough or at all, they just would decapitate you right there in the middle of the throne room. Take care of the threat. So that's a very real threat that he's asking this woman to go into. I'm going to get past the guy with the axes and the spears to go see my husband, and then she tells Mordecai that she hasn't seen the king in a month. Remember what he was busy doing?
Living his life.
But remember, we had that second gathering of our virgins? So he's kind of busy. He's a little busy at the moment. He's entertaining some new concubines. Okay, so she tells him and kind of reveals this little bit of fear and hesitation. Has she actually fallen out of favor with this king? Maybe she's not wanted or welcomed in his presence anymore. Maybe the king's just really busy finding himself a really new woman, because she hasn't seen her husband in 30 days. Okay? So very real concerns that are going on here. So let's find out what happens. Verse 12. And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all of the Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this." So this is one of the most powerful moments in this book. Mordecai sends back a response, a pretty bold one at that. He says, if you stay silent on this matter, deliverance will rise for our people from somewhere else. But don't think that you're excluded from this decree. And he even tells her, all in your father's house will perish. Who's Mordecai? Part of her father's house. Her fathers were brothers. Okay? That he's including himself in that. All right? So even I'm on the chopping block here with you. But he says, one way or another, I believe that God's going to deliver his people. I don't know how, and I don't understand why this is, but I can guarantee you, one way or another, God's going to save us. Whether it's through you or somebody else. Okay? So then he tells her something that has echoed through history, and I'm sure something that you have heard over and over again. Who knows whether or not God has put you exactly where you are for this exact moment and this exact reason. So he's reminding Esther that her position of sitting in that queen's throne wasn't by chance. That God had directed every single one of her steps to put her there, maybe for this exact reason. Okay? But regardless of if it's divine providence or not, then God is going to save his people, regardless of whether she's going to choose to let him to use her or not. Okay? So you have to feel the conviction of Mordecai here, that he is so certain that God is going to do something, that he sees an opportunity for Esther to step up and do something, But even if she chooses, remember our human will, even if she chooses not to, he knows that God's going to have somebody redeem them. Okay? So let's find verse 15.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wasn't she supposed to like keep it to herself that she was a Jew though?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like telling this guy that the king appointed to her. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna figure that out later.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
big twist coming.
Got it.
For those of you who don't know, Brittany hasn't read Esther. Everybody else is going, yeah, wait for the twist. Yes, we're going to, this is setting up for an incredible twist. I'm so glad that you're here. Yes, so she was commanded not to tell, and now Mordecai is saying, I think it's time for you to step up and talk. Okay?
Okay.
And she's going, if I talk, I'm gonna lose my head. Okay? Alright. So, verse 15. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And me and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. Okay? So Esther hears Mordecai's faith, Mordecai's conviction, but she doesn't rush to action. She doesn't then go, okay, and rush to the throne room. She doesn't. She waits. So she tells Mordecai, okay, I can't do this alone. This is a heavy weight, y'all. This is a heavy weight. This is not just picking up the phone, okay? This is like if you were going to try to go storm the White House, right? Okay? You would be stopped before you even cross the gate. This is what she's having to do, even though she's the queen, okay? So she tells Mordecai, I want you to do this. I want you to go out through all the capital. I want you to gather every Jew you can, okay? And for the next 3 days, day and night, I want you to fast for me. So remember we saw Esther's feast? Now we're going to have Esther's fast, okay? Fast in my name. And me and my 7 women are going to do the same inside the palace, okay? And then, after those 3 days, then I'll go before the king, okay? So she has this plan in place. We're all going to pray, we're all going to fast, and if God hears us, one way or another, I'm going into that throne room, even if it means my death. Because she says, if I perish, I perish. At least I'm going to try. I'm going to go before the king. And if he doesn't hold out the scepter to me, then you're right. God's going to raise up somebody else. But at least I'm going to choose to try. Okay? So this is bravery wrapped in utter humility. She's not pretending that I'm the queen, I'm going to go before the king, he's not going to kill me. She knows that even she could be a threat to the king. So she is asking for support from her spiritual community here. Go make preparations. Go fast on my behalf. Pray that that golden scepter is going to be handed out to me so that I can have a chance to talk. She's just asking for that moment. Not even that the king is going to change his mind or figure out a way how to do this, but just give me an opportunity to talk, to plead my case for my people. Okay? This may cost her everything. Because remember, he's not, King Ahasuerus, he's not short on women, right? He had no problem gonna chop her head off, and he's got lots to pick from. Okay, hundreds that could just fill the throne. It's not a big deal to him. Okay, he sent Vashti away. It's no big deal to get rid of another one. But this means everything to her. It's gonna cost her everything, but she's gonna do it anyway. And did you catch the irony of verse 17? I love this little twist here. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. And what have we seen everything up until this point? Esther obeyed the words of Mordecai. Esther obeyed, Esther obeyed, Esther obeyed. And now we have Mordecai obeying Esther. Okay? So it's this great twist that he fulfills everything she asked him to do. And that's an incredible, incredible show of humility on Mordecai's part as well. Okay? So, how do you prepare spiritually Not that any of us would have to, storm the gates of a palace and have our heads chopped off. But those times, those seasons where something's really heavy, maybe it's a transition, maybe it's a big unknown, maybe it's a health scare. How do you prepare spiritually for those types of battles?
Pray.
Yeah.
That's it, pray.
Has anybody ever practiced fasting before one of those before? No. It's an incredible tool. I do highly recommend it. It's hard, especially if you're not used to it. But during those moments of the physical desire to stay alive, to read the word, and to pray, it just becomes so much more focused on, all right, I can sacrifice something for you to hear me. I can draw my attention to you. It's something as simple as feeding ourselves. None of us are going to starve if we miss a meal, right? But this dedication, both night and day for 3 days, y'all. Most fasts were during the day, but she makes it clear here to say night and day, both together. Don't eat or drink anything for the next 3 days on my behalf, okay? So that is some deep spiritual preparation that she's got going on. And I wonder if Esther recalled the words of Joel. So Joel 2, verse 15. Blow the trumpet in Zion, consecrate a fast, call a solemn assembly. Remember, she's not just asking Mordecai to pray, she's asking for all the Jews in Susa to pray. And then Joel 2:17. Between the vestibule and the altar, let the priests, the ministers of the Lord, weep and say, spare your people, O Lord, and make not your heritage a reproach, a byword among the nations. Why should they say among the people, where is our God? So Esther and Mordecai kind of echo these words from Joel. Joel, that was written about a couple hundred years before them, that if you got people together, if you prayed, if you fasted, if the spiritual community came together, that God would hear, okay? And they're saying, don't let us just disappear, go into the horizon to be wiped out so that other nations go, where's your God? Your whole entire nation's getting ready to be wiped out. Where's your God in all of this? Okay? These may have been the very words on Mordecai's heart and soul and Esther's heart and soul. But it's kind of interesting that Esther asks them to pray and to fast for 3 days and 3 nights. When the Lord commanded Abraham to take Isaac to the Mount Moriah to sacrifice him, they journeyed for 3 days and 3 nights. And in Abraham's mind, his son was already dead because he was going to have to sacrifice him. And after the Lord delivered Israel from Egypt, after 3 days, Pharaoh's chariots came chasing after them, and God parted the Red Sea. Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish before he was thrown up again on shore. And far into the future of Esther, for 3 days and nights, Jesus was in the tomb, dead. So you see these pictures of life and death in the 3 days. And that's where we're going to leave Esther for now.
Just like extend the class for 2 hours.